Okay, no questions are coming in. So again, if questions sort of come up in these next few sessions, feel free, or these next few slides, feel free to type them to me and we can address them before Jeopardy. Otherwise, we will move on. So going back to talking about service and training days, I believe I mentioned yesterday that there is ongoing training each month, and really we aim to have 5 or more hours of training on a regular basis. And this is a time to refresh technical training, to talk about soft skills, to check in about professional development. It's also a time to have fun, to get back together as a team, to sort of have that team atmosphere in that peer network again. Some of the trainings, and I did mention this yesterday, some of the trainings, especially when it comes to maybe some new technical tools, those might be held as webinars, but more often than not, they probably will be live, and so they will be region to region. Your regional supervisor might have already talked to you about possible future training days. For example, I think that LA on a regular basis might be meeting on Fridays for training once a month, something along those lines. And so they'll develop these plans and definitely share them with you, and so you'll understand, and hopefully there'll be a consistent sort of date or training schedule that you can be aware of and be ready for on a regular basis. Trainings more often than not will be at the regional hub. There might be field trips now and then, so that is an opportunity to get back together, but also maybe to explore some new areas. And then also yesterday we talked about the fact that there is, you know, additional orientation that will take place in the month of November. And that will be definitely a time to get a little bit more technical training during the next few weeks. And then the other piece of training is the service days, which I started to talk about yesterday and then held off because we were going to talk about them a little bit more today. Service days are really a time to break from your typical work and to have fun and to do some sort of community service where you can see the immediate impact of what you're doing. There are 4 service days throughout the year, although there may be more than 4 dependent on your region and your availability. I know that some regions might have a training day just in the next upcoming, or excuse me, a service day just in the next few weeks, and so that's a great way to sort of kick it off, work together as a team towards some sort of immediate impact. I do have the dates of service days. I mentioned there's a minimum of 4 of them. And you'll notice 3 of those days are actually days that are definitely set in stone. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, AmeriCorps Week, which has a tendency to be in the spring. We don't have a definite date for that at this point of time. Cesar Chavez Day, which is March 31st, and then a regional day. And the regional day is the one that's a little bit more flexible. That's one that your regional supervisor will work with you to determine exactly what that day will be and what surface project you'll be doing on those days. Again, you'll notice that both Martin Luther King Jr. Day and Cesar Chavez Day, those are also actually 2 of your holidays. So I did want to point this out, and this is why I started talking about service days yesterday. You are required to do your day of service on those holidays. Most of you probably know MLK Day is a huge national day of service, so of course AmeriCorps is involved in that process. That's a great way to link up with other AmeriCorps programs, maybe do a service day with them or work with the communities that you've been assisting with, really get involved to meet your community, to see the other people who are involved in sort of the service movement. So even though Cesar Chavez Day and MLK are going to be 2 of your holidays, this is something you're expected to work, but then you can take another day off that month to make up for working on that holiday. So for instance, since you have to work the Monday for MLK, you can maybe take off that Friday instead and have a long weekend. So it's a little bit of a caveat, but just be aware of that. And then since we didn't look at them yesterday, I did want to just put up all of the holidays for a moment today. And again, I will be sending you an electronic file of these so you actually have them. The one thing that I will note, and we started to talk about this yesterday, is with the winter holiday, there is only 2 or 3 days that you have off plus the New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. With that said, some of the offices that you'll be working out of are going to be closed for much longer during that break. And so that is something to start realizing who will have the offices open, who will not have the offices open. And for those of you who maybe will have a little bit more of a prolonged period of time, start to work with your regional supervisors to understand now how it is that you might be able to bank some hours so you can take off some extra days, or to work with them to make sure that you're able to spend as much time with your family as you need to during that time, and still understanding that, you know, you have responsibilities with CivicSpark. So just a conversation to start for each of you to understand what that holiday might look like in your specific region or in your specific project, and how it is that we can prepare for that, since you might be missing more than just those 4 days of hours, or 5 days, I guess, of hours. Program deliverables. So I do have just a few slides on the program deliverables, but I'm going to be talking very briefly about these because we're going to be talking much more about these tomorrow. I mentioned yesterday that there are the 3 goals of AmeriCorps: getting things done, strengthening communities, and member development. We have reports for each of these different things: the capacity building, the member development, and then the volunteer engagement. Each of those does have their own reports to show the impact in each of those areas. Capacity building will have monthly reports. There's also, and again, you'll learn much more about this tomorrow, but there's the gap assessment and the pre and post assessment. Member development, you'll have the member assessment and just recording your hours on a regular basis. And then the volunteer engagement is the great stories and volunteer logs. Again, we'll talk about these later and definitely go over this again. On a weekly basis, your most important thing that you will be doing is keeping accurate time cards. And again, yesterday we talked about the service versus service prep versus training, and I imagine that a lot of you have a lot of questions about that. We'll start to talk about that a little bit more tomorrow when I actually show you the EnCORE tool, which is the tool that you'll be reporting everything on. And again, as you start actually conducting your projects and as you start seeing what prep training might look like outside of orientation training, you'll start to get a feel for what is what, but that's a conversation that we'll continue to have throughout the next few weeks. Monthly basis, you'll be completing your monthly progress reports, submitting a great story, submitting any volunteer metrics that you have, and then if you are creating a regional newsletter or some sort of either internal or external newsletter, you'll definitely be part of that. And then additionally, the professional assessments will be done both at the start of the year and at the end of the year, and there'll be some other pieces that you'll be working on throughout the year. So just a few deliverables for you to keep in mind. I just mentioned EnCORE. This is our reporting tool, and we will be taking a tour of EnCORE tomorrow. My guess is tomorrow we'll be able to hopefully get most of you, at least introduce you to the EnCORE tool, and then hopefully either the last week of October or early November, I will be able to put together another webinar that everyone can attend where we learn a little bit more about the tool, and maybe we can do it region by region so you can sort of learn specifics and discuss within your team. So that should be something that hopefully I can set up with your regional supervisors, or I might be just setting up a statewide one so that you can continue to learn more about it outside of just this week and outside of tomorrow. This will be your online reporting tool where you record hours, where you submit all of your reports. So it is sort of important to understand this tool. Okay, last few things that we will be talking about: the disciplinary action and then safety plan. And I will try to get through these slides in just about 5 minutes or so that we have enough time for Jeopardy. So diving into the disciplinary process, pretty basic. If there is a first offense, it's going to be a verbal warning. Verbal warnings are a little strange because they do require an action item which has to be signed off on. So even though it is a verbal warning, it probably is also going to have some sort of written component. The second warning is a written warning. At that point of time, or after that point of time, the program director gets involved, and then the third warning can be up to or including dismissal. What we really want you to know, though, is if there was ever the need to go into the disciplinary process, and you guys are all amazing, so of course this isn't going to apply to you and we're not going to have any problems during the year, but if there was any sort of issue, we do want you to know that we will work with you at each stage to make an action plan to correct any sort of issue or any behavior or anything along those lines. We definitely want this to be a professional development opportunity for you. So anything that might come up is really a chance just to have a conversation with you about how you can improve that professional development to help you plan for your next step in your career and to help you get ready for life after AmeriCorps. We want to see you be successful, and so we're just helping you along that way. There are some activities, though, that will result in automatic dismissal, and this is on page 35 in your member handbook, and hopefully you can just sort of review the member handbook and all of these different things, because now we're getting into a lot of lists of things. So that'll be something that you can sort of review on your own time. These all sort of seem obvious. You know, consuming alcoholic beverages during service hours, that is something that we, of course, wouldn't want you to be doing. Definitely some of the, you know, selling illegal drugs during your hours. Again, these sort of seem like the obvious ones that you would know that would probably result in some sort of disciplinary process. So just take time to read through that list when you do have some time. And then yesterday I talked about the compelling personal circumstance. There's really only two ways that a person could be released of service. One is that compelling circumstance, and that is any sort of unforeseen circumstance. Maybe it's an illness in the family, or you're called into the armed services, or there's some sort of unforeseen activity that we could not plan for. And then the second one is for cause. And for cause is if you just decide to quit. You decided that this isn't the best idea for you and you want to leave for one reason or another, or if you're dismissed. And so, you know, with the compelling personal circumstance, we will always work with you to make sure that you get a prorated education award. If you're released for cause, unfortunately, you forfeit your education award at that point of time. For cause, again, another list, and it is, I think this is still on page 35, it might be on page 36. These are things that these are examples of things that would result in going through the disciplinary process that could ultimately result in termination. So again, you know, they seem pretty obvious. Just read over that list, make sure you're aware of exactly what they are. And with that said, if you are terminated but feel like it was done unfairly so, you can go through the grievance process. And again, this isn't something I'll speak that long about. I just want to make sure or make you aware that it does exist. And the thing that I would really say when the takeaway about the grievance process is it is something that is through AmeriCorps. And so although we will help you go through that process and we'll make sure everything is set up, it is more of an AmeriCorps dealing. And so what I would recommend is whenever possible, keep any sort of evidence or paper trail of anything that you might see is there you might think is important. We really can't help you if there is no evidence of anything, and because this is outside of our hands, because this is a little bit more of the AmeriCorps side of things, we want to make sure that if you did have to go through this process, you sort of understand things and are prepared in advance. End of disciplinary and grievance process. Talking really quickly, the last thing, safety plan. If there is an emergency, please check in first with your regional supervisor. The regional supervisor will then check in with us, or if you cannot get a hold of your regional supervisor, you then should reach out to me, or if you can't get a hold of me, to KIF. So first line of defense, go to regional supervisor. Second line of defense, go to either KIF or myself. If there is some sort of natural disaster, you know, there's an earthquake in the Bay Area or something along those lines, if there's a big emergency, your team will all check in together, and then the team leader will then check in with the Sacramento office to just give us your update and whatnot. I'm actually guessing that most of you already have your regional supervisor's cell numbers, and many of you actually already have my cell already. And please feel free to use them if you need to, and check with your regional supervisors about how it's best to reach them. I mentioned earlier I often can't answer my phone, so an email or text might get through to me quicker. Just make sure ultimately that you're being respectful in your use, not calling them at every hour of the day or calling them nonstop or texting them nonstop. Be aware of how they want to be communicated with, and we definitely understand if you're in an emergency, you need to get a hold of us, but you do have our cell phones, you do have our personal information, so just be aware of that and be professional. I am going to stop talking now, and hopefully you guys can have some fun. So we're going to do Jeopardy at this point of time, and regional supervisors can explain the rules a little bit more. You will be splitting up into teams to compete against each other, but one of the first things to do is to take about 5 minutes after you split up into the teams to review the material with your team and ask any questions. So I will stay on the webinar on mute for a little bit longer, but if any questions come up that regional supervisors are having problems answering, feel free to type them in and I will go ahead and answer them. Otherwise, you guys can go over the instructions in your regional teams, and good luck to everyone. Thanks.